We've seen Ted Cruz get awkward with his own kids, and now we've got video proof that he can do it with strangers' kids as well. Take a look at what happened at a recent rally of his in Indiana.
And when we do that... All right, apparently there's a young man who's having some problems. Thank you, son. Children should actually speak with respect. Imagine what a different world it would be if someone had told Donald Trump that years ago. You know, in my household, when a child behaves that way, they get a spanking.
They don't misbehave because they do not want me to touch them.
So at Trump rallies, he encourages people to beat up adults. And at Ted Cruz rallies, he encourages people to brutalize children. And they cheer at both of those events. So that's what we just saw happen, right? Hey, you should use a little more violence with this kid, and maybe he'd shut the fuck up. That's what Trump says about grown-ups. Just as gross. Expect worse, what Ted Cruz said.
Isn't it interesting how there tends to be a lot of contradictions in Republican ideology? Look, there's a lot of contradictions in a lot of people's ideology, not just Republicans. But here you have a conservative Republican who believes in the Bible so much that he wants it to dictate our lives, even if we don't believe in that religious doctrine, right? At the same time, he's advocating for violent behavior against kids, you know, in the form of spanking or corporal punishment. At the same time, he's in favor of the death penalty. At the same time, he's in favor of more guns and making sure more and more Americans are armed. I mean, it's like you advocate for violence while you claim you're like this good, wholesome Christian. It just doesn't make sense.
Yeah. Look, I've had, my friend is a psychologist. He was born in the South, and I have had many long arguments with him about spanking, which, by the way, I know statistically a lot of the audience is totally in favor of it, and they're like shaking their heads at us right now. When you try to make the case that it's violence against kids, they do not accept that.
Okay, so I'm gonna keep it real with you. Sorry to interrupt you.
I'm not even judging it. I'm just identifying it. They do not accept that that's violence against kids.
I have to speak my piece because I was someone who experienced corporal punishment, and look, I know that there's evidence, scientific evidence, proving that it actually causes more harm than good. With that said, I grew up fearing my mom, okay? And that deterred me from a lot of bad behavior, except for when I turned 15 and I started sneaking out of the house every night. It didn't deter me from that. Or dating a guy that my parents didn't like.
Which is, I think, the exact behavior they want to deter.
Yes, yes. So look, I get it. I mean, it's a form of discipline that a lot of people agree with. I don't agree that it actually leads to the results that you think it leads to.
Well, and we saw recently there was write-ups about a meta-analysis of something like 70 spanking studies involving 160,000 kids. I'm probably getting those numbers wrong, but it's a lot of studies. And they looked at all of those studies and all of those tens of thousands of kids, and they said they were not able to find any evidence of positive outcomes from spanking. So they didn't find super strong negative outcomes. It didn't turn every person into Donald Trump. But if your idea is that it's going to make people harder working, more disciplined, more respectful, you can believe that. There's just no scientific evidence of it from decades of studies.
In fact, the evidence is the exact opposite. In
that
fact,
it has light negative outcomes.
Well, in fact, that it's according to the studies, spanking tends to increase child aggression. Spanking predicted increases in children's aggression over and above initial levels of aggressive behavior, and in none of these longitudinal studies did spanking predict reductions in children's aggression over time. Instead, spanking predicted increases in children's aggression. So the exact opposite.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree with that. And now that you've read that to me, it makes complete sense. I'm definitely aggressive, and that could be part of the reason
why.
There you go. You guys don't understand. I was spanked as a kid a lot, okay? That was the form of punishment that, you know, my mom preferred. And I think to some extent that fear that I had of her did deter me from behaving in bad ways, but I was definitely aggressive. I'm still aggressive now. And also, getting spanked as a child does bleed through into your adult life, where you begin to start liking getting spanked.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying?
Well, like we were saying before, it's always seemed weird to me that you spank kids to stop them from being naughty, and you spank adults to make them a little more naughty. It's weird how that works out. But this is about. Oh, sorry.
I was spanked growing up. Somehow we got here with Ted Cruz. I wanted to do this story because of Ted Cruz hitting little boys. But the thing is I was spanked growing up. I love my parents. Jimmy talked about all the studies, you know. So if someone needs to hear the real part about it. But think of it this way: do we advocate yelling at your child? A lot of people do it. But if you see someone do it in the middle of the store or cuss at their children, right? A lot of parents do that too. Johnny, you little fuck! What the fuck? Get out of here! And then do all this shit. The kid will get quiet, he'll get scared, and they'll do what you tell them to do. But probably when they're 7 years old, they're gonna start cussing at kids at school, and you go, "Where did he get this language from?"
Yeah.
But I believe most people would agree that's probably what happens when kids get yelled at, get cussed at home, and intimidated. They start taking it out on other people at school
Probably.
or wherever.
It's
Yeah.
God, parenting is so tough. I don't even know how you guys do it. Like, what are you supposed to do when your kid
Solitary
is acting
confinement.
up, right? You
give
tell
them-
them to go stand and face the wall? I mean, I've seen kids do that and they laugh. Like, they don't.
You give them cough syrup, right? Cough
You get 'em
syrup.
drunk
am I
a
right?
bit, they become
Cough
easier
Give
to
them
do
that
it.
codeine.
So,
No marks.
But that's my point. Like, so a lot of people reject that your kid will be more aggressive and want to fight and want to hit other people after they've been hit. It's just, it makes sense. It's 2 plus 2. But what it is, and maybe this is judgmental, it's lazy parenting. I love my parents.
I think so.
It's lazy and angry parenting. Maybe people had their kids too early. Maybe people had their kids when in situations they weren't happy in, whatever else has happened. But you take your aggressions out on your kid because they did little things, and they always do little things that fucking annoy you. They do. That's what their kids do. Then you take it out like that and you snap.
Yeah.
That's not their fault. You just have to think more. You're the adult. But
Yeah.
it's hard. Nobody said it's easy. But that's the reaction. You're not doing it because suddenly they're better kids. You're doing it because you're mad at them.
Yeah, that's absolutely right.
Go ahead. Well, let me just say, I also love when people make they do the mental gymnastics, or they excuse hitting a kid by saying, what if a kid, if it helps the kid, what if a kid runs out in the street in the traffic? It's like, I don't know, what if your girlfriend runs out in traffic? You gonna punch her? But you wouldn't do that to a grown-up, but you would do it to a kid.
Yeah, you
That's what-
wouldn't do, like, if you want to teach them to like fear and respect authority, like, well, then why don't we let bosses beat their employees? That'll
Right.
teach them to respect
Wait,
authority.
they're not supposed to beat their employees?
They're not supposed to. But and the idea is that that's crazy. No, I mean, like,
Yes.
you're able to understand what you're doing. You don't need to be beaten. Like, do kids need to? Anyway.
Okay,
Yeah.
wait.
Here-
One
there
other
there
thing
is a
that I
Ted
want-
Cruz connect. Okay.
Okay, the Ted Cruz
Okay.
thing that I want to bring up very quickly. Another interesting, I don't know if you want to call it hypocrisy, about right-wingers like Ted Cruz is they want to meddle in your personal life if you're a woman and tell you that you can't have an abortion, you shouldn't even be allowed to take birth control because, it's a precious life, we must protect it. But once it's born, let's beat the shit out of that kid.
Again, they're not going to see it as beating the shit
I
out. I
know,
want to
I
acknowledge
know,
that
I
for our
know.
fans because, as I said, I have stats, and there might be a reason why Ted Cruz is coming out so pro-spanking. It's because a lot of the country, the majority of the country, is pro-spanking. So we exist in somewhat of a bubble, and I'm admitting that. And because I love charts, I want to run through some really fast because there's some interesting differences in who likes spanking and who doesn't. Now, this is the change over time. You see it losing about 15 points of popularity over the course of something like 20 years. And so it's going down, but still, the majority of the country likes it. If you jump next, you're going to see there's a religious difference. Yes, Christians more in favor of the physical punishments for their kids. Although big changes up and down for not born-again Christians. Then you see there is a racial gap as well. It's always been more popular, actually, amongst African Americans than amongst white families, but popular for both. And then finally, there's a partisan gap as well. So look at that. Still, 80% of Republicans, almost the same number as back in the mid-'80s, are in favor of it. And if 80% are in favor of something, yeah, you're going to want to come out.
That explains why maybe a lot more Republicans in general are violent maniacs.
Maybe.
In general.
I can't say that.
In general, we have a lot of violent maniacs, Democrats and independents. So it's not, but that shows you that there's going to be statistically, there's going to be more.
Possibly. Yeah.
If you believe science, John,
Yeah.
and that's what we're about, right?